people that are not in the regular UdK context, so great that the PR worked. My name is Alberto De Campo. I'm a professor for generative art, computational art here, and yeah, we have the great pleasure of two wonderful guests that I had personally had the pleasure of working with a very long time ago, so it's really nice to finally catch up. I'd like to say a big thank you to Marcin Petruszewski, who invited the two of them to also present in Weimar, and that created the opportunity to also invite them for both the talk and the concert here. I'd like to read you quickly read you the short biographies of both of them, and Brian will start with a talk mostly about his visual work in collaboration with Curtis, and will lead right into Curtis's talk. Curtis Rhodes is a composer, author, and professor emeritus of media arts and technology at the University of California, Santa Barbara. He's a pioneer of granular and pulsar synthesis. He has shaped the field of microsound through both his compositional practice and his books, which include the computer music tutorial, the microsound book, composing electronic music, and also a current new edition of the computer music tutorial. He served as editor of Computer Music Journal, which led to the founding of the academic field of computer music, actually, and has worked at MIT, at IRCAM, at Université Paris 8, and at Create UCSB, where he ran the media arts technology program for a very long time, which was a big innovation, actually. Recent releases include the record Electronic Music 1994 to 2021 on Ellie Records. Ryan O'Reilly is a video artist whose practice spans moving image, collaborative performance, and mixed media drawing. He's also an improvising musician playing double bass and electronics, so he's covering kind of everything. Alongside his long collaboration with Curtis Rhodes, including the Pointline Cloud and Flickertone Pulse albums and videos for numerous individual compositions, he has worked closely with Woody Vasulka, whose pioneering electronic image work informs O'Reilly's own approach to the moving image as a material to be sculpted in time. And I hand the floor to Brian.
Good afternoon, everyone. For my presentation today, it's sort of all over the place. I think whenever you talk about practice, for me, all the different practices kind of start overlapping and weaving into each other, and things that I'm working on one thing start becoming something else, so on and so forth. So I've tried to kind of break it down into sections, and sort of the more I looked at the sections, the more I even saw how they were sort of bleeding into each other. So it will kind of flow and go on, but at any point, if anyone has a question, just ask me while we're in the moment. So normally with my students in Singapore, my presentations I always have in HTML, so they're web pages, so I can kind of go to Crazy Town and then find my way back. But for this, it's just a linear. So if I do start kind of going to Crazy Town and not making sense, please just hang on. I'll try and bring it back around in some way, shape, or form. First off, thank you, Alberto and Marcin, for inviting us to come over. We've had a wonderful time. This is my kind of a bit of my bio. I work in electroacoustic composition. I also draw and paint. I'm also a contrabass player. I also improvise. I also compose my own music, compose for other people. I have a few different groups. I have a group called Black Zenith, which is a drummer. I'll show you a little bit. Drummer playing full drum kit. And I play electronics, process him, dub him out, do things. And sometimes I do the video, sometimes I have other video artists I work with. There'll be a whole section where I kind of talk a little bit about my collaborations. So in some of them, like my project with Curtis, I'm just doing moving images. Other ones, when I did work with Woody Vasulka, who unfortunately passed away, I'd mostly do music, and I'd also do images. Woody was kind of very free spirit, 1960s free spirit, so he'd kind of give you something and then say, but don't follow it too close, bring yourself into it as much as you can. And then I have other filmmakers I just compose music for, and other people I just do videos for, and back and forth. So hopefully I'll be able to. Currently, I'm based in Southeast Asia. I am a senior lecturer at University of the Arts, Singapore, LaSalle College of the Arts, School of Contemporary Music. Not a very sexy short name. It keeps getting longer and longer every year. My research focus is in electronic music composition, visual music, and I teach all of the students music improvisation. The nice thing about the program is we have different streams. So we have pop music, jazz, classical, composition, and electronic music. When I first went there, none of them were talking to each other. And I was completely horrified. So I said, let's just have one class where we all get together every week and we improvise. And of course, the numbers were small. It's about 15 people, and it's now ballooned to like 40 people a semester. So I didn't really think about how you would start directing an ensemble of 40 young people who don't see each other normally all week and want to just hang out. So I've developed strategies towards that. So if anyone teaches music improvisation or things like that, the lecture doesn't dive too deep into it, but we can definitely have a conversation about it. These are two of my main collaborators. That's Jan Jansen, a Malaysian saxophonist who runs his own space called Kanilistua, and as well as a label called Laubam, and another label called Kanilistua. He lives in Kuala Lumpur. The two of us with the drummer there, Darren Moore, we have one group together called Game of Patience, a free jazz group where I play contrabass and electronics. But also Darren and I have another group called Black Zenith. So I thought, rather than put two pictures of him on drums, since it's my lecture and he's not here, I put two pictures. Okay, so excavated elements. A lot of the way I work in kind of through threads, which I'll talk about, I sort of do lots of writing, lots of thinking through things. And again, these are not generally for other people, it's just me. I was thinking, what I need to talk about in this lecture, how I could structure this. And this is the sort of chaos that came out of me trying to organize this into a linear form. And of course, I kind of sit and go through and start writing them out more. And I think after I wrote this out, I haven't referred to it since, so don't worry about that bit. That's another thing you'll see kind of when I talk about the graphic notations. I make them while I'm working on things, and then I sort of never look back at them again. So this is a part of the process how I work. And I work a lot through sketchbooks, the idea of constantly writing things down, externalizing things. And for me, getting it out as soon as possible is really important. This idea of referring back to them, and I'll show you how I kind of do refer back to them, is not so important to me. As long as I've kind of worked through the ideas myself, they start applying themselves to different things. So ideas that start out musically could then move into the realm of drawing and painting, or something I'm working on when I'm painting could move into working on videos and so on and so forth. There's this sort of constant flow and dialogue between things. So sketchbooks are one of the ways that I really focus in on things. I keep sketchbooks kind of like I read books. I don't really read the whole book. I wish I could be a sit down and read the book from beginning to end. I kind of jump around with books. And the same thing with sketchbooks. I don't start with one masterpiece and do every page. You know, I have 30, 40 of them around the house at any time, some in my office, some other places. And a lot of the ideas in sketchbooks, some might start with text, and then I just keep working them and building up images. So this is just an example of the one that was closest to me when I was putting together this lecture, so I just shot a video with my phone. So some transfer drawings, transfers of photographs, some ink, lecture set. And that was it for that one. I really like the images in this one, and unfortunately I use like the cheapest like $1 notebook with like the worst paper in the world. So it's like whenever I even buy the nice paper, nothing good comes out of it, so oh well. Another thing that happens is I work with lots of different elements. The idea of collage and assemblage and building forms up and then digging back into them and excavating. One of the other working methods that I find very akin to the sketchbooks is I use these metal sheets, and I kind of work up collages, and the little dots there are magnets. So I'll work up things in different ways before I fix them down. These actually, I think, were pages from a sketchbook that I ended up ripping out and magneting up there with a few other elements. The sketchbooks also contain lots of different ideas that, again, when I'm working on music, especially, I don't know how many of you work on electronic music, I think there is a fair amount. You know, sometimes traditional notation will work for something, but a lot of times it doesn't. So a lot of these aren't graphic notations in the sense I'm going to give them to other players and have them play it, though I love that. I love getting that from people. And they say, hey, let's work on this graphic notation. But for me, this is kind of me making sense of what I'm working on structurally in the moment. And then, as you'll see, a lot of times they just kind of go into these piles, and then I recollage them into visual pieces and things like that. These are some of them before they've gone in. Some of them too start out as one idea, and then I just keep working on it. It becomes like I sort of lose track of what it was originally intended for, and then I keep drawing, and it becomes more a visual piece. There was something we just had. We had a. Do you guys know the Beast, the Birmingham Loudspeaker Orchestra? We just had Beast in Singapore, so we set up a big Beast system. So I was tracking out some different ways we could spatialize the sound from one of my pieces. So this is where we get more into, it starts out as one thing, and then I start painting on it, and so on and so forth. My studio, too, I don't really separate them. I have several desks set up for electronic music making, and then I have several desks for kind of collage making. Yeah, some mishaps happen sometimes. Things get paint on them that shouldn't. So some more of the sketchbooks that I keep working on, doing some transfer drawings, some stills from my videos, get collaged in. Some YouTube pages, which I'll show a little later. Those of you who play stringed instruments know you lose the hairs on your bow all the time, so there's some hairs from my double bass bow that made it in there somehow. And then one of the ideas I think about a lot is when I'm working on these things, when it finally comes time to how do you exhibit works like this, especially works that are constantly recycling. One of my kind of quick and easy ways is the setup tables. The clips are because people who run galleries, they really don't like the idea of people turning pages on books or touching them. So they made me put those on. So of course, any chance I could get, if I was in the gallery, I'd take them off and let people look through them. And then of course someone would come running, what are you doing? So, getting some more of them. The other side of the table. So this idea of graphic notation, I spoke about it a little bit, about it being more for working in the moment, finding relationships between sounds. Again, graphic notation for me, I love the whole tradition of it in music making and improvising. It's something I work a lot with the students. We have this really beautiful building in Singapore at LaSalle, and the architects were this Japanese team that kind of based it on the tectonic plates of the region. So it's really impractical. It's like one of the most impractical buildings. It's beautiful, but it's impractical. So it has all this kind of skewed architecture. So one of our assignments is I have the students take the architecture of the school and make graphic notations out of it. And here's just some more excavations from the sketchbook. Again, this is a black metallic sheet. The design department was having an exhibition. They asked me for some things, so I went through some of my sketchbooks and just put this together for them. Close up of one. So some more excavations of things I was working on, just finding relationships. And when these things are done, what normally happens to them is they go into piles like this. So I have several piles around my studio of like half drawings, of things I've worked up. So you can see like sort of the middle ones, they started out as actually one of these spatial relationships between what I was working on musically, but then of course I started putting ink on it, spilling things on it, different layers of ink, and then everything kind of goes in and it's fair game. I don't have this is a finished piece. And I feel the same way about video and sound. It's like things kind of go into the pile, I take them out, I may work them a bit, collage them into other things, I may scan them in, bring them in digitally to something else. I might even video, like I'm a big fan of using my iPhone and videoing drawings up close to get different gestures to then bring in. So it's a constant sort of recycling of all of these different elements and ideas. Some more excavated. Some of them get out of hand and I work them too much so the pages start ripping apart, so then I just glue them together in different ways. Get more of these piles unruly. I also have a lot of these boxes, stacks and stacks and stacks of boxes. Marcin asked the last time when I gave the lecture in Weimar, he's like, do you have them labeled? No, there's no labels on them. They just kind of pile up and I go through them occasionally and find treasures. Some more that start out as different types of notation. These are some, if you look at the top, I can talk a little bit more about this. I do a lot of painting and drawing with drum brushes. So all of my students know when it's time to retire their drum brushes, I want them. So you dip them in ink and get these beautiful iterations and gestures out of them. Again, the same curator with those clips. And she has these, like I've talked to her recently and she's like holding them in a box and saying like, oh, we have an idea for a new exhibition. I feel like someone's shaking like the chain, for the dog when it's time to go out. I'm like, okay. So just some more of them. These I scanned in, took some photos of some of the images that I showed you already, and I just loaded them into an AI. And I said, combine these in new ways, and I put a little bit of this double bass piece I was working on it. And I said strictly to it, do not add any text. None of that is mine. So it apparently knows my further developments, and it's a variation of them. And some of it's okay. But I find that, because I did like several iterations, this was like the first and second, and when I went to like the third or fourth, I started putting like roses and like weird cogs and more text. So this was kind of as far as I went. That's enough. One of these ideas that was really formative to me in this idea of images and sounds crossing over to each other. You can see here at the top, there's this little strip. These ideas came to me from a system called the UdK, which was a system of Yanis Xenakis's, of where you would draw these lines, which were called each line an arc. So these are some of my UdK pages from the 1990s, late 90s. And what I used to do is I would do drawing, and then I would place it on a photocopier and slowly move it to kind of get variations of it, and then I would print them onto overhead transparencies so I could layer them in different ways, and then I would go in and trace certain elements of the arcs into the system to make sounds. I was a musical assistant at Les Ateliers UdK back in the 90s. That's where I met Curtis. So I worked with a lot of guest composers with the UdK system, and I found the more intense and beautiful the picture was, the worse the sound always was. So for me, these were just used as partial elements within it. Here's the sort of famous examples of the first UdK piece by Xenakis, Massimi Alpha. We actually had these hanging on the wall from the old UdK. And if you look at the originals, they had none of these sort of internal lines and dialogue. So if you look outside, they're very complex. But when you see them inside, they're very boring. So I think there were the overarching shapes, and then actually the interesting sounds with just boring lines in the middle, in my opinion. It's just another example of these sort of raw UdK pages, things I would use elements from. And from one of these, I could get 7 or 8 things. And again, not being precious about it, as soon as I started drawing in arcs, then the sound would be like, okay, well now the sound needs this. I'm not like stuck on this drawing as an absolute score. It's just a way of kind of generating these ideas. There's a bunch of text I'm not going to read. I'll leave it up for a second. That's enough. Nobody wants to read that. But then a lot of these pages, I started working into drawings because I had way too many stacks of these overhead transparencies. And I feel especially bad because, you know, they're plastic and they're going to live forever. So I was like, how can I start using these again? So I started collaging them into different works. And they show up quite a bit. But I also find that from working that way, spending so many years kind of doing the one-to-one from sound to image, it's definitely influenced my mark making and the way I sort of address things. There aren't sounds in my head or anything like that, you know, anything romantic like that. I do listen to sounds while I'm working. Normally I patch up modular synths and have some generative thing working in the background, and then, you know, you go over and turn a knob and get paint on it and keep working. Some more, some excavations from my sketchbooks that became my tattoos. I live in a very, very warm place, so I'm freezing to death here. I know I see everyone walking around with shorts carrying a beer at night. I wish that was me. So just some elements, and again with the tattoos, I worked with this wonderful tattoo artist in Singapore, and we had this idea of using different elements, and he would pull them away so there's lots of imperfections. And I love those. I was like, we'll tattoo them like that. And we got started on this one, which was going well, and then there's another part here. And unfortunately, he passed away midway in the process of really aggressive cancer. I talked to him one day, and 2 weeks later, he was gone. So I said to his brother, who's also a tattoo artist, I'm like, I guess they're done. So, but still, it was another sort of process of working with a collaborator, going through these sketchbooks and these drawings, and then him taking elements, and myself and the two of us working together, and then using them on the tattoo film, and using the imperfections from there too as a part of it. See, I wasn't lying. I have to wear these sleeves underneath my jacket.
I didn't even know those existed. Totally in all.
The sleeves? It's a real like Singapore uncle thing. Like every taxi driver would be wearing these. So when I first started, all of my students started calling me uncle. Okay, here we go. Okay, so talk a little more about the mixed media drawings. Here's some of them again. I have these magnetic whiteboards where I'm constantly arranging them and finding different ways. And also on my desks, things just meticulously, they go from complete chaos to another type of chaos. You know, it's like I have 100 different things and I want to organize them, so I get 100 different boxes to put my 100 different things in. It feels like that way sometimes. So even larger drawings, I start taking smaller elements. There's some of those boxes.
Do you consider all of those graphic scores?
Some of them start out as graphic scores, and then they just kind of, when I'm finished with them, go in these piles I was talking about, and they get collaged into other things, or even pieces I've exhibited, I might take and start cutting up and putting into other things. The X-Acto knife is probably, if you had to ask me what was like my #1 tool that I use for everything, it's the X-Acto knife. That's the thing I use for everything. Also, a little bit of a hoarder mentality. It's hard to find old books and materials in Singapore because of the climate. So anytime I find little scraps of paper, especially around the art school, they're picking them up. Invariably, the boxes fill up, so I start going down to my kitchen and stealing bowls. I'm not very happy in my family at times. They're like, where are the new bowls? I'm like, I don't know. Maybe somewhere. So a few more of them. I think a few of these have shown up before, some of the photographs. You know, this is pretty much what it looks like under all of my desks, even the music desks. I got the different piles trying to organize things. If anyone here's a neat freak, I'm probably like pushing their buttons already. And again, when I do exhibitions, I literally show up with 2 portfolio cases, and ahead of time I have the Galerie individuals install these white magnetic sheets. So then I come in and start arranging them before an exhibition. And I get a little bored. You know, usually an exhibition's up for a few months. So I'll normally sneak in and take things down and put things up. And again, curators hate that more than anything because they kind of feel that it needs to be one thing. So actually for this show, there was a gallery minder, and she was always on the lookout for me. So whenever I come in, she'd start following me. Hey, I'm just here, I'm showing my friend. Distract her. There's more smaller collages. Another thing I like to work with are these ideas of process. So the idea of collaging, the idea of using a photocopier to kind of manipulate things, physical manipulation. I don't really use Photoshop. I probably use Photoshop as much as my mom. It's just like color and tint to like bring things up. I don't use manipulators. But I do use a lot of lino cuts. And these are not pre-planned. I used to live with a printmaker, and he would take months slowly carving his lino and getting his stones ready for lithography. I just kind of start carving, ink up, use it, carve in a bit more, use it, carve, and eventually you end up cutting through it and they end up sort of falling apart, and then they become something else. Here's just some of the marks I get, and then I draw over them. You can see in here a lot of these have the, like towards the bottom, they have the lino prints. A lot of the drum brush drawings are in there. I have some close-ups of other ones. Here's like a just kind of stark example of what you can do with the drum brush drawings. The metal ones are much more preferred because they get all really strangely bent in different ways. So as you do them, you can squeeze them and contract them into making thicker and thinner lines. The idea of transfer drawings, I love using. I use clear acrylic matte medium. And you can use this on other drawings. You paint a coat on, let it dry a bit, push it down. And some people, of course, leave it and then slowly peel it off and rub it away. Whereas I prefer to get just parts of it, so I do that a little bit. So there's some examples of that. Anything brown is the leftover coffee from the night before that I leave in the studio. I have a tin where the old coffee or tea goes, so that doesn't get wasted either, as you can see. Some close-ups. I also have a really, really great ex-student who's a photographer who spends most of his time with his company doing weddings. I don't know if anyone's probably worked at a wedding as a videographer. It's not a very easy job. So anytime I ask him to shoot stuff materials for me, he jumps at it at a fraction of the cost. He's like, I'm just so happy to be here. And I find this a very interesting process too. I'm going to talk about collaboration a bit, but working with the photographer, he'll choose parts of larger pieces that he feels are the quote-unquote interesting, which would be things that necessarily I might not focus in on. So it's nice always having that sort of second set of eyes. Or I think those of us who make music, we've all played someone a piece of music we're working on, and you instantly like, oh, I need to fix that. Oh, and even before they give you any feedback, you know something inherent. And sometimes the drawings become a little more special. It's like, oh, you really like this one. Okay, I wouldn't pick that. Some more of them. So this is using the same drum brushes, but instead I painted it over with white gesso and then went in and scraped it out with the brushes.
Do you also work with mold? Do you also work with mold? Because you used the tea as a coffee before, I feel like if you had just left it in there for a little longer, it could become mold.
In Singapore, you don't have to leave it long. Mold just appears everywhere all the time. Yeah, it happens quite a bit. And sometimes when it's beautiful, I'll take that same clear acrylic and I'll acrylic it down. So I think, I'll put it this way. I have a friend and he does very, very pristine, he's Swabian German. So he does very, very pristine, clean things. And you should see how much he freaks out in Singapore. He's like, how do you work here with the paper? And I'm like, because it can get dirty. I'm fine with that. As you can see. No, I had someone come to my studio and I had this stuff on the floor, and as I was kind of talking to them, I was walking on them, and I thought she was going to have a heart attack. She was like, wait! It's like, they're on the floor for a reason. They're fine. Don't worry about it. But then they go on the table, and I start thinking they're becoming something, but then they go back on the floor, then they go back on, back and forth. Okay. So I'll talk a little bit about video synthesis, which is another area I feel very passionately about. I work about quite a bit. Since some of you will come to the concert tonight, you'll see some of the different styles of video synthesis. Alberto, I did set my performance timer for 30 minutes.
Go ahead, please go ahead.
But I didn't hit play. So it should be doing this. But it wasn't. Sorry. And so
I always managed to forget to hit record.
So I'll start over. You can all pretend you haven't heard it. So I'm sure a lot of you are comfortable with audio synthesizers and modular synthesizers. It may be software or hardware. What a lot of people don't know, maybe a lot of y'all do, that in the beginnings of analog sound synthesizers, there were several analog video synthesizers. The same signal can be used to generate images as well. Same techniques like frequency modulation. You can also modulate images. The first instrument that I really got to work deeply with was called the Sandin IP. I did my undergraduate at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And the rule with the Sandin IP was back in the day, Dan Sandin wrote out these elegant, wonderful plans and made them available to anyone who would send him, I think it was like you had to send him $2, and he would then mail you in the post the plans on how to build it. So I know for sure two of the teachers at the Art Institute, Bob Snyder and Ed Rackes, both built one. And this one was actually built by Phil Morton, who was the person who started the video art department at the School of the Art Institute in the 70s. So when I was working there, we had a big modular synthesizer by EMU. And one of my professors, just kind of every week, I was obsessed making new pieces with that. He said, you need to go downstairs and see the Sandin. And I was, I'm like, no, I got everything here. He kind of after a year, he's like, okay, I'm going to take you down and I'm going to show you this video synthesizer. And then, of course, I didn't leave that studio all summer. That summer, I was there every day because people weren't very interested in it. And then I had this wonderful opportunity when I was in Karlsruhe. I was working at the ZKM as a guest artist. And next door to me were Woody and Stena Vasulka, who were two childhood heroes of mine. And Woody and I and Stena, we all started bonding. And we were talking one night over maybe a little too much beer about the Sandin IP. And Woody said to me, he's like, there's one in the basement here. I'm like, there's not one in the basement here. Come on, there's probably like 6 or 7 of them. And Peter Bible was there, and he's like, I bought one. I was like, what? He said, I bought Phil Morton's. So I made Peter march downstairs with him, and he had this amazing Sandin IP, the one that Phil Morton had made. And it was incomplete. Well, they said it didn't work. It worked. The issue was all of these labels that Phil had put on in the 80s had all fallen off. So as you took it out, they were all just laying there in the bottom of these boxes. So luckily, I still had my notes from when I was in undergrad. So I had someone send them to me from the States, and I had drawn diagrams of most of the modules, so I could relabel them and at least figure out what they were doing, and we got it working. But the sad thing was, kind of after my 3 years there, I wrote a lot of documentation, and then I packed it up with Woody, and I saw the technicians kind of wheel it away. So I think it went back to that same room where it was before. So if any of you are interested, you should probably write the ZKM a letter and say, I want to use the Sandin IP. Documentation's in there. So I use that quite a bit. Actually, on Curtis and Mai's first DVD Point Blank Cloud, there's a piece called Voltaire that uses all of these original materials that I had developed on the send-in IP back in the 90s. I'd have it transferred from these old, huge pneumatic tapes. They look like dinosaur VHS tapes. They're like 4 times the size. So yeah, I don't think I had anything to show that, but that was my first introduction to it. And then I've done several residencies other places. This is from Signal Culture when they were in upstate New York, and then they moved to Denver. Now they're back in upstate New York. And they have many different wonderful electronic analog devices. So they're another place that you can apply for a residency, and then you can go for a month. And they have a technician who shows you how to use sort of which instruments you want to use. Of course, I took the method. I wanted to learn how to use everything. So every morning he would come and teach me one of the pieces of gear, and then I would stay up all night generating materials with it. And the next morning, I'd maybe sleep an hour or two. The next morning, I'd come back and have to teach me another piece. And then maybe my last few days, I started chaining them together in different ways. And I will talk about a few of them, but everything you have to capture through their old vintage camera collections. There I have the camera aimed at the screen of the wall monitor and then piped over to another screen. And actually, where I'm standing here taking a photo, there's another camera, so I'm getting 2 different angles with 2 different types of vintage cameras, getting very variable results. So I'll just show a little of this video clip, just so you can see some of the materials, and I'll talk about the instrument a bit. This sound is prevalent through every recording you do, no matter what. This is just the ground hum of the building. It was an old, early 1900s building, so all of the instruments did this. And I think this is good. This illustrates what I love about analog video synthesis is you build up a system and lots of things interact with it, especially if you're shooting through a camera. You know, a light goes on somewhere, it will shift the whole way the cameras react, and so on and so forth. This was made using one of their instruments based on Nam June Paik's wobulator. So it's an old television taken apart, and then using magnets, you kind of twist the signal on it. I removed all of the signs around it for these photographs that say do not touch here. A couple of them say touch and die, because yeah, you could actually do it. So I made sure I switched it off first before I took all of the pictures away. Here's a kind of picture that shows you the gruesome nature of what it can do to you. See the coils around it for the magnet, the copper coils.
You talked about the experimental television.
They're related, but they're different. So Experimental TV Center is also a great place, but they kind of went away for a bit. So these guys are still around, and they're making software too. They make really wonderful max patches based on these old devices. If you're interested in this sort of stuff, they're very amazing, wonderful people who are really open-minded to any project, whether you want to make video art or you want to make tools too. They have a whole tool workshop just filled with things. So here's the interface for it. You can see my hand. Curtis pointed out it was green in the last lecture. Yes, I did not color correct it. Apologies. There's also inputs on it, so if you have a Eurorack format synth, you can have that influencing it. They have a small 1-panel surge synthesizer, so I use that for a lot of the sounds. This was sort of my first night, and I just kept recording all night long. I've not gone through even all the recordings I made there. And then I ran it through the surge, through the Kern color manipulator. So here's some of the nice colors you can get out, because it's black and white. So then I use the camera, run it through Kern Video Lab, and add in some different colors. To show you the different types of materials you can get. If any of you are attending the concert tonight, one of the pieces named Bubble Chamber, I used the Wobulator for all of it. Then took the materials, went in and meticulously edited them to the sound. So it's also kind of like this duality of having this freedom of where you're playing with all these visuals, and then you kind of come up with a structure and lock yourself away for a couple weeks and edit it down. The other awesome, wonderful instrument was the Home Video Lab. Yeah, my colors are horrible on this. This was my kind of first experiment, so I was getting really excited about using color after 2 days of black and white. So you can take different layers of video and key them together in different ways and add colors to them. So you get kind of stuff like this. They only had, so I didn't bring any footage with me, so they had some VHS tapes, and one was a documentary on seagulls. So I kind of used that a little too much in the early ones. Here's a more ugly one with the seagulls. I thought the most cliche thing to do would put like a drone underneath it. Okay, enough of that, that's horrible. So when I started experimenting a bit more, one thing I love to do that is once you patch up a synthesizer with a big complex system, I never stop recording, even with audio, as I start disassembling the patch. And you get these great shifts and what was happening here is I was doing some video feedback you can see in the middle. But then these glitchier things started happening when I was sort of half unplugging it. And it was stuttering in a very digital looking way that I found really compelling. So here's just really next to no input signal. Camera was just aimed at something. And all the glitches are just from me touching the cables. And whereas everything else I was kind of showing you was really flowing and smooth, this added these hard edges to it that I liked very much. Again, I don't know how compelling they are. It's like after 3 days of watching flowing, slow moving, you see something like this and you get excited. I was really lucky because they were in Wergo, New York at the time, and up the street was Dave Jones, who makes these wonderful, wonderful, wonderful video modules that none of us will ever get our hands on. So I went there, you can see all of his laser cut wood panels, and I was talking to him, oh, this is great. We were trying stuff, and he's like, oh, it's not ready yet. And his assistant took me aside and said, I'm going to kill him. Everything is ready. He just wants to come in and tweaks just a little bit here and there. And he gave me this demo, and I was like, I want to be here for a week. And I've messaged him several times, and he's like, yeah, they're almost ready. I was there like maybe 5, 6 years ago, and they were almost ready then. So you're never going to see these. I'm never going to see. I think his assistant is going to walk away with this amazing, beautiful synth when Dave gets sick of them. But what they did have there that I loved was something I had experienced before. So Dave Jones made the Jones raster manipulator. So you can see it there, it's just some of the raw output going to the oscilloscope. And this was based on the ideas of Rutz and Etra, their scan processor, which is something I'd work with Woody. So with them, again, you're dealing with the resolution of this small XYZ scope, but then I would project it to several old CRT displays and video them on several layers. As I said, a lot of my work with Woody was dealing with the Etra scan processor. There's some stills from our very poetically named scan processor studies. And again, I can explain it a bit more. You can achieve these in Eurorack format, for those of you who use. Here's a sort of diagram of what you can use for it. I have a modified version of this, but I also use one of these Vectrex old video game systems from the 70s. And you can find them on eBay sometimes for like $100. And there's all these different tutorials on how you can modify it to become an XYZ or oscilloscope, which is nice because you've got a screen about this big instead of dealing with a small screen. And if anyone's interested in this, I'll have my contacts after and I can converse with you. For those of you who aren't interested, don't worry. But as you can see, I got very similar stuff than you would get out of a Etra scan processor. I'll show you a piece of mine using the Etra scan processor. Whenever you see them shaking a bit, footage, it's because it was a really old building and these huge trucks were coming by at night and these old tripods would shake. But I didn't realize, of course, I looked at the footage 2 months later and realized, oh, again, there was that. Here you go. That was just all the footage. It's accumulated over 4 things. It's, again, kind of like my home working methods. It's a very dirty place to work acoustically, so you just have to kind of embrace these imperfections. So I made a short study with it, just using the footage I generated, and the sounds are all the surge panel that they have there. It's one of the surge panels that don't have oscillators. It's one of the old ones, so the dual slope generator, for those of you who know this sort of stuff, it was essentially the only oscillation happening. Very short piece. A lot of the edits, I would just carve stuff out of the middle, so they're hard edits, so every time the sound changes, it's just kind of where I was in the process. It wasn't a very fluid process. I'm going to skip over this piece just for time's sake. At the end, I'll list my video page. A lot of the stuff is up there, and I'm going to put a lot more, I keep saying this, I'm going to put a lot more stuff up on the video page. Some of my different projects, again, I mentioned Black Zeta. There's the 2 of us performing during COVID time. That's not a gimmick. We had to wear that in Singapore. They were very strict. Not the hoodies, but the masks. Okay, that's all you need of that. Game of Patience is my other free jazz group. None of that. I've also worked with different artists. I worked with Thomas on this arachnid orchestra where he hired an arachnologist and they went and collected all these spiders in Singapore. And they built webs, and then we used different sensors and things to kind of interact with the spiders. I'm not going to show you this. This is another super long one, but I can. You want to see a spider? Yeah. Ah. It's not giving me here. Here, maybe I can. I tried to download everything. Maybe I can just jump online real quick. Oh wait, there we go. So this is one of those things. Of course, the curators talked, I think, longer than I performed for. That's okay. You know what? I have it on here as just a video file. She's actually a really wonderful person, so I feel really bad cutting her off, but sorry. Okay. Spiders. Okay. You guys can't see that. Let's do this. Okay. So those are those spiders that we had like an arachnologist because most of the spiders are venomous. And actually one day I kind of went and I came back the next day and she said, don't just reach into a bag. Any of the bags back here, the kind of really poisonous one got out. And I was like, ha! She was like, don't reach into any bag fast. One of the poisonous ones got out. So I didn't. But a lot of these here are filled with female spiders, and they would drop crickets in there, and they'd get excited, start hopping around. I had piezo mics underneath it that would then go to my low-pass gates in my synth, so it would make polyrhythms. And she didn't tell me this, but during the performance, they started really freaking out. I'm like, what's going on? She said, oh, I put the male spiders in there because the females like to eat the male spiders more than they like to eat the crickets. I will spare you. Scene feeding time. You can hear they're crawling around and opening up the low pass gates. There we go. Then we have these different mics on them. The awesome thing was there's no glass around them. The spiders were just in the space. So everyone, of course, thought it was an exhibition, so everyone would get really close. And there'd be like a web with like, 100 spiders on it, and then they'd realize they're just there. By this point, I'd lived with these guys for like 2 weeks, so they've been building these webs for months, so it wasn't very shocking to me. Question?
There's kind of needle coming in from the right side.
So that's one of the microphones they use. So they were using this mic that, for the previous exhibition, there was something that they were doing with structural engineers. So they use these mics for scientific measurements, like on bridges or other structures. But we found out they also would pick up on the spiders moving on the webs in different, unique ways. Like it's not a pristine recording, of course, but.
There's a visual resemblance between.
Yeah, so this one started freaking. You can't really hear it on here because, unfortunately, they put the camera sound on the video. But I was playing these tam-tams and looping them and using octaver pedals to pitch it down, and all of the spiders, like I hadn't done that in this space, all the spiders and all the webs started jumping around. And she was particularly perturbed with me. So all of these are available online, so. You just look up my name, spiders, and come up. I think there's a lot of people out there playing around with those. Another group of mine, I'll talk about it, I won't really show you, is electromagnetic objects. Whereas a lot of the things I deal with, really trying to control the video a bit more and really work with, so like my pieces with Curtis, I'm really working with his music and editing things together in a very, very intuitive way. Whereas with this group, we deal with just receiving FFT analysis, and the video footage is essentially interacting with whatever sounds we make. These are some examples of types of materials. I also work with this viola player named Garth Knox. We usually take commissions from other composers. This is a piece that Kaya Sariaho wrote for us. Really wonderful composer. I use some of Stainless software. I was going to show this, but again, on my video page, keep moving. And then my works with Woody. The scan processor studies is probably the most well known. I can show just a little of this. The numbers mean nothing. I just had a tape filled with numbers. So the way the sound was handled in these was kind of a complete opposite of electromagnetic objects. So I took the video footage. So Woody just came in one day with this stacks of data. And he said, can you do anything with this? Here, I'll see you later. And I found out this beautiful stuff on it. I was like, yeah, I can do something with this. So I edited them together and kind of made, quote unquote, the master tracks. And I projected it on my wall, and I had a Superfly patch I had written. And I just played along. So I watch it, play along, sometimes 2 times, and edit them together. A lot of times it's the first take. Again, I have an excerpt of it up on my video page. I'm going to put the full thing up. It's 40 plus minutes long. I will save you all from that. But again, It's up there. I'm going to keep wrapping things up because my fake 30 minutes, there's only 6 minutes left. Then this project, I work with a filmmaker named Vladimir Petorovic, a Serbian filmmaker, who does narrative films, but also does sort of more, he calls it animation, it's not really animation. For this one, he's Blender. And the two of us, this was an interesting project for me because we work completely online. So I had access to the video footage online as he was editing it. He had access to the audio. We would kind of each go in at different days and times and edit things. And I'll put it this way. I think many of you probably have people who you collaborate with. And every time you do a project with them, you say to yourself, I'm never, ever doing anything with them ever again. And then like a year goes by and he's like, hey, I have a new idea. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So try giving each other access to everything in a piece and see how long you guys get along. Things you love disappear, other things. So we finally reached something. This is also available. He loves sending things to festivals. Oh, and also everything he does, there's like a faux scientific bent to it. So he likes presenting everything like it's a case study. This is kind of his case study on an extract, like the concept was an extract from the ocean in the book Solaris. So what would happen if you put it under a microscope? So again, these mean as much as the numbers in my previous piece. Let me just show you a little bit of the animation. Trains left the station, we gotta keep moving. A lot of the sounds are me playing my contrabass, but it's convolved. I used a convolution reverb, a hardware one, and I took a lot of impulse responses from gongs. That's why it has a much more metallic sound to it. A lot of harmonics there you can hear. Again, this is completely available online. I think there's going to be probably, this was the final one, but there was 4 final ones, so I was just messaging him the other day that we should put it all up so people can see the process. Like in some of them, I've won the argument for the day, and the other ones, he's won the argument for the day. So now to talk about my work with Curtis. Again, our first DVD, Point Line Cloud. And then we did one for the Asphodel record label that was then re-released by Presto Records. Flick Compost, which is released by Wergo, as part of the ZAM edition. And the works that we'll be performing tonight, a lot of them have not been released. Curtis has released the music on Eli Records. I'm really bad with dates, so that's what the 2 question marks are. You know, I didn't do the TV for it yet. But one of the ideas I work with, again, I use a lot of these video synthesizer elements and things. But I was talking to the first time I came back to UCSB where Curtis was, I was showing my work, and everyone else was doing generative code-based stuff. And they were all kind of shocked that I was still using cameras and using these other things to generate materials. Of course, like the last piece you saw with Vladimir, I'm perfectly happy doing generative stuff as well. You know, code or camera is fine by me. But I started thinking of this idea of like sort of taking the ideas of Pierre Schaeffer and music concrete composers and how you apply them to images, which of course the filmmaker Stan Brakhage had been doing that since the 60s, using his camera as an instrument, finding different ways of using the camera as something that scans. You zoom in, you pull out, you move across surfaces. So I'm thinking quite a bit about that, and there's probably a paper in there that's slowly coming out. We'll see. You don't have to read any of that, it's okay. And then I just added some of these at the end because when I gave this lecture in Weimar, they said as I was giving the lecture, it started getting darker and darker. So these are just some colorful stills at the end. As you can see, the video work has a lot, at least I see it in common with my drawing and painting and other things in sound making. There's lots of layers happening at once, iterations of layers. Sometimes they look like landscapes, sometimes sort of cityscapes. Thank you. I was 12 seconds in the red of the live timer. Again, maybe we can, if anyone has questions, we can jump into them now, or we can have a question session with Curtis and I at the end. I'll jump ahead. My IG and Vimeo and all that stuff you can get from here. You can reach out. If you have any questions, if something comes to you later in the week and you're like, oh, just drop me an email. It's my personal email. Also my work email. But I'll be honest with you, we're starting our long summer break, so probably the first email I'm more likely to check than the second one. We okay for questions? We save them for the end? Or does someone have a question they really need to ask? I think we'll do a short break, Albert.
Yes. Yes, let's do a 3-minute break and then continue.
Okay. Yeah, if anyone has any dying questions,
We'll join question sessions afterwards.
okay.